All right, so thanks for joining today. Again, my name is Rob Galvin. I will be your presenter today. I am the developer community manager for RhoMobile. Today's topic will be about UI frameworks, and really it's kind of a UI framework roundup. So we'll be covering different aspects when it comes to UI frameworks, how to get your applications looking great, what are your choices, things like that. Okay, so today we're actually going to be covering kind of three things. Just so you know that this presentation is available, there's a QR code. If you want to jump right to it, there's the URL. I'll leave this slide up for a minute here. Um, the presentation actually has several links in it to get to a variety of different resources, so it will come in handy. So today what I'm going to cover is a couple of things. So first I'm going to, this is about building applications and making them look great. Um, what are your choices? The first thing I'm going to walk through are what are some of the factors that you should consider when it comes to choosing the right UI framework. So I'll talk a little bit about that. And then I'll get into a more deeper discussion about what I'm calling the different personas, if you will, for these frameworks. So there's different types of frameworks. I've kind of grouped them, lumped them into three major categories. So we'll walk through each of those and kind of talk about the differences and point out some of the unique aspects of different types of frameworks. And then lastly, I'll go through a demonstration of how to use our application generator in RHOStudio and replace the current framework that we provide out of the box with one of these other frameworks, for example. Okay. So again, there's the QR code and the URL link if you want to download this presentation or view it. All right, let's get a couple disclaimers out of the way. So first off, we're going to be talking about a lot about different frameworks, and these are based on my personal experiences with them and personal opinions. Has nothing to do with Motorola's opinions about any of these. I'm not making any claims as to which one you should choose. Because it is a complex decision depending on the scenario that you're looking for and the types of things. And I'll get into that later. So I just wanted to kind of put that disclaimer out there. The second kind of disclaimer I just want to mention is yes, your mileage will vary. You need to actually look at these yourselves and come up with your own personal conclusions. One size does not fit all here. And what I'm trying to do in this presentation is just to show you what's available, what you should consider, and the different factors that might affect your decisions. And of course, depending on your application, there's so many different scenarios and different types of experiences that you're looking to provide to your users. Certain things may work for you, and again, your mileage will vary. Okay, so now that I got those disclaimers out of the way, let's jump into the meat of the presentation. Here's a little scorecard that I put together that I usually go through when I'm evaluating the application that I'm going to build, and I want to pick the right framework. Okay, I can kind of go through these different aspects, and this may not be the complete set of things to consider, but some of the things that I typically go through, right? I think one of the things that most people tend to focus on is this first box here, right? So the first kind of layer there is a set of tools that the framework provides. A lot of developers focus on the UI components or the set of widgets that the framework provides, and that's very important, obviously, depending on the types of things that you need to provide in your application. So take a look at, okay, what does this framework actually provide in terms of UI components, right? Design tools is another aspect. Some frameworks provide aids in helping you actually design and prototype before you actually start coding, which could lead obviously to a better end result and a better application. So what some of these tools provide, some of these frameworks provide other different varying degrees of design tools, whether it's stencil designs, wireframe. Also, some of the tools frameworks actually provide editors where you can actually build this and it's integrated. So consider that, right? And then the last thing on the tool section is, okay, now that you saw all the UI components and you've kind of designed your application, chances are you may have to tweak them a bit depending on what you're trying to accomplish, right? So take a look at how easy it is for this framework to be customized. How can you put your own look on it? How can you tweak it so that you get better performance on different devices? What are the capabilities in order for you to customize this framework? Okay. And I get into taking a look at how is this framework suitable for mobile devices. You'll see as I go through the different types of frameworks that a lot of these tend to be fitting across platforms, whether it's desktop, tablet, mobile. When we're building RhoMobile applications, typically they're running on a mobile device, right? So take a look at particularly when it comes to the UI components, how friendly are they to touch, right? Do they support the gestures and the swiping? What sort of aspects do you actually need to expose touch capabilities in the framework? Okay, and then one of the other factors when it comes to mobility is being responsive, and I'll get into that and actually show you a demo. If your applications need to fit on a tablet plus a typical mobile device, how does this framework support responsiveness? Okay, and how does it adapt? Are you going to need to do a lot of extra heavy lifting yourself to make your application be responsive to orientation, to device size, or do you get a lot out of the box with the framework when it comes to responsiveness? Another aspect that I look at is I say icons here, but it's the graphic resources that are included inside the framework. Do you have enough with the framework where you can actually utilize the things that are included with it? So icon sets, graphics. Are you going to need to go in and actually get designers and other resources to provide some graphics for your buttons, for your tabs, things of that nature? And then it kind of relates to responsiveness as well. Does the framework actually provide an icon set represented as graphics? Or do they actually use web fonts or CSS so that the graphics can be scalable and customizable very easily, right? And I'll point out some examples of that. Um, so now you kind of take a look at the tools and how mobile friendly the framework is. I then say, okay, it's a new framework. What's going to be involved in order for me to get going quickly with the framework? Okay, you'll see as I go through the different types that there's different approaches that each framework provides. Some you actually really need to follow by their rules completely. Others are more adapted where you can utilize your own skills and have more time spent in actually designing your application instead of working customizing the framework, right? So how quickly can you jump in and actually start using, understand what the approach is of the framework? The next aspect is, okay, now that I've taken a look at the framework and I'm now going to start following an approach here, what are the set of resources that this framework provides? Take a look at the depth of the documentation. In the past couple of weeks, I've analyzed really probably about 15 to 20 different frameworks, and there's a variety of different degrees of documentation, examples, how they present the examples, how you access them and use them, how you have access to the code. Take a look at those. I think you'll get a good sense for how easy it's going to be for you to get going just by looking at their documentation. And then the big thing to really kind of help you get going is, okay, now that you looked at the documentation, what sort of community is behind this framework? Do you see a lot of discussions posted on their forums? Do you see a lot of activity online where you can, reach out and ask a question and really get some help using this? How active is this frameworks community? I think you'll see a variety of different degrees of that as you're looking at them. And then lastly, taking obviously, and a lot of these are probably obvious to you, but just kind of, I find this scorecard useful as I go through. I'll kind of, click these boxes and make them red, yellow, or green, and then I'll be able to say, okay, this is the right framework for me, because making the right decision from the beginning is really important. Because you're gonna, quickly see what kind of investment you need to make in this framework. Is it something you're just going to use once? Is it something you're going to use longer term? One of the things that tends to trip people up is the licensing, right? You go online, you find the framework. Oh, great, it's free to download. And I've seen probably about 6 different license models that are out there. Some are free with different licensing, MIT, GPU, WTF, PL, all different types of licensing, and some actually, you actually do have to pay for to actually use their framework. Okay, and then another point in terms of the investment goes, um, looking at your core skills. Are you a JavaScript developer? Are you more of a markup developer? What are your really core skills? Are you going to be spending most of your time developing your app or trying to manipulate the framework and obey by their rules, right? That'll give you a good sense of how much time you want to spend more time in developing your application. And then, lastly, a lot of these frameworks have grown over the course of time. Some of them are, backed by big companies. Some of them are backed by individuals, and they've really kind of grown quite rapidly. So take a look and really see, okay, who's behind this framework? Where's it going to be in the next 3 years? Have we seen these frameworks come and go over the course of time? And you really kind of want to understand their history and what's behind them, and where will it be down the road. I think that's really important. So I hope you find this kind of scorecard, if you will, useful as you start evaluating the different frameworks. So let's get into the first type of framework. This is what I'm going to get into, these three framework personas, if you will. I think this first one is probably the one that we're most familiar with. Number one, we include one of these in our default application generation, but I think this is where this all kind of started, these UI frameworks. Remember when first type of consumer mobile devices came out, and everybody was building native applications, and now we wanted to build these cross-platform applications. The first thing was, hey, how can we get this application to look and behave as natively as possible? And this would kind of started, I think, this whole category. And typically these come with, a huge widget set of controls that they've built over time. What sort of controls can I deliver to make the application look and behave as natively as possible? So that's, tab bars, panels, buttons, all the typical types of controls that you would expect to use in a true native application, right? So what these try to do, obviously, is to try to look and behave and like a native control. And some of them do a better job at that than others. And this is where that whole your mileage will vary comes into play. Um, but really, that's what's going on here is that we're trying to get that native experience. Typically, this is accomplished through CSS, through themes and CSS styles. This is how it's done using a variety of techniques. Pretty heavily on CSS and JavaScript to deliver, animations or the UI elements. And typically these come with those libraries. Okay, and really in this category, I think you see two different types. I'll call one of them is declarative approach to using these frameworks. So this is like the jQueries, mobiles of the world, where you're actually doing most of it in markup. Usually, you can do it in markup, like this small example here, where you just add an attribute to an HTML element, and you now have something that looks like a native list instead of a typical web list, right? A lot of these come with an equivalent JavaScript approach to manipulate that behavior, but for the most part, they're very declarative in nature. And these tend to be the frameworks that are very easy to get going quickly. It's easy to kind of, add an attribute to an HTML element, look at some of their sample code, and really get going pretty quickly. At the same time, if you're not really kind of sure how to use these the most effectively, you may get into trouble as well. And just need to be aware of that. The other type of framework we have here is what I'm calling programmatic. So these are more JavaScript orientated, where you have to deliver the UI in JavaScript. So of course, if you're not strong in JavaScript, this may not be for you. But if you are, and really are truly a JavaScript developer, these frameworks like Sencha, I'll point out some examples with NU. This is where these frameworks come in handy, where you can actually utilize your JavaScript skills. And typically, it's you're declaring these UI elements in JSON, where they have properties and values, and it's all in code. and to some it's more structured and easier to understand, right? So when you look at these types of frameworks that are really trying to be native as possible, this is where you start looking at the different approaches and does it match your skill set, right? Um, so some of the things to be aware of when you're considering these frameworks and how it fits into your Ro application, again, is looking at these controls and saying, okay, if I'm delivering this type of application and I want to deliver this type of use case, do these components, let's say, for example, I don't know, a carousel, if you will, or a panel where you need to swipe, is that going to fit the use case that you're trying to deliver for your application, right? And then again, some of these controls may not be as mobile friendly as you may think. Some of these companies that provide these frameworks had originated from the desktop web world, and they had a set of controls that they provided to web developers for typical desktop usage. And now, obviously, when mobile became very hot, they needed to come up with another set of controls and framework for mobile targeted. So they took their desktop controls and applied them to mobile. So um, be cautious of that, and test those out, and make sure you're actually getting that experience that you're expecting from the control. Okay. And again, like I said before, more times than not, you're going to want to be able to customize this. So how deep can you get with customizing the variety of different controls? Do these frameworks basically provide simple ways to control colors and size and things like that, or can you actually really truly change the behavior of the control and make it more mobile friendly? Okay. Um, and then again, like I said before, this is where the licensing comes into play. So a lot of these different frameworks here on the left-hand side. And just by the way, this presentation, you can click on these icons and it'll jump to the main page of the framework. Okay, you'll see different licensing models as you click through and visit their website. So just be careful of that, and especially around the jQuery area or some of these libraries, they tend to include maybe some other third-party plugins that were written, and they kind of put this package together for you. So you really need to understand what you're getting in all the components. This, it may, seem to you that this is, freely to use, but understand what is actually putting these frameworks together. Okay. All right. So let's get into a couple of examples of some of these controls in this I want to be as native as possible type of framework. Let me jump into Enyo.js, which is one that you may not have heard of. This is actually from, there used to be a product, HP Touchpad, not so long ago, and this was a framework that was developed for that operating system, for that product. And now the framework still continues to live on independently of the HP touchpad. And it has some really nice components. One of the things that I wanted to point out for this audience is globalization, which I haven't seen a lot in all these different frameworks, but this product seems to offer a lot. If I take a look at just a simple, date a date picker, right? It has a variety of different. Let me pick Great Britain, and now you can see that it's day, month, year, right? So it has a really nice set of globalization features to it, even when it comes to different names for fields and strings, time as well. So if your application is really looking to provide kind of global localization, this framework might be for you. Okay, so it has a nice set of controls for localization. Um, all of these frameworks tend to have lists, different types of lists that you can do. I thought this one was kind of neat. This was the lazy, well, not this one, this pull down Twitter list. So this is their typical list here, but this one has that nice feature where you can pull down and load more content, right? So take a look, and most of these frameworks provide this nice kitchen sink online access where you can actually quickly see the different types of thing that it provides. It also provides some of these layouts where you can fit things in different ways. So the point of this is really just to kind of let you know some of the controls that were found there. Okay, so let me go to the next example, jQuery Mobile 1.3, which was recently released. And I've played with this a little bit. I haven't extensively tested jQuery Mobile 1.3 and incorporated it into a RhoMobile application, but some of the things in here get into some of this responsiveness that are really cool. If you take a look at some tables, right? So let me take a look at this reflow table. You can see on a nice like an ET1 type of device, you'll have a nice landscape view here. But if you take that same application and you bring it on a smaller form factor, the table automatically adjusts and you get this nice kind of style. So this latest release in jQuery Mobile has really focused a lot on being responsive and using that same control and kind of fitting across different different size devices. Okay, so that's a nice new feature of jQuery Mobile. They also have several different things when it comes to responsive tables. What was the other one I wanted to see? The panel. Okay, that's not the one. Oh, the type ahead. That's what I wanted to show you. So they have a nice, type ahead. Let's see if I can get. Oops, sorry, I lost the link on that one. There's a nice new component for when you're selecting when you're typing in maybe a search category. So maybe you have that long list and now you want to filter it. They have some really nice new abilities for type ahead and kind of narrowing the list down. This was that panel I wanted to show you. It's a nice. Actually, it's in the jQuery example itself. So let me go back here. So see that they have this nice new menu where it pops open from the left-hand side, which is pretty much some of the common menus that you see on mobile devices nowadays when your device is really small. And notice it even responds to the left-hand side now, and you can nicely fly in a menu on the left-hand side, which is really cool. So definitely check out the latest version of jQuery Mobile. It really has added a nice set of UI components to the library. One of the other examples that I don't have a link here to this is Dojo. Dojo is a probably one of the more robust frameworks. It is a little bit more complicated to understand. There's a huge widget library. It's probably one of the original MVC types of frameworks that came about, and it is one of those types of frameworks that are a part of this bigger picture when it comes to frameworks. But one of the things I really liked about them was some of their charts and gauges that they provide. So if your application is looking for to provide some sort of graphics or gauges, you may want to take a look at Dojo. Dojo Mobile is the product that you want to look at. It has some pretty interesting controls. One of the other things that comes into play is the customization. So a lot of these frameworks provide the ability to change the colors and styles, and that's nice and that's great. Chances are you may run into situations where you may need to go deeper, and if you're a CSS expert, you'll be able to jump into their CSS and manipulate that. In other cases, you may not be able to do that. And if the framework provides the ability to change some certain attributes, and in this case, I point out jQuery Mobile's theme roller, where you can change a lot of these things. And some of the features in here, like text shadow, corner radius, the opacity, these are CSS3 attributes that don't necessarily perform so great on lower end devices like Windows, traditional Windows Mobile or Windows CE devices. Um, so you may want to, you can come in here and turn those off or change the behavior so they're not, putting any extra processing on those devices. And in some cases, you may have to go a little deeper in the CSS and actually turn those things off. I did a whole nother webinar on this topic when it relates to performance and things to consider and common CSS3 attributes that are typical performance bottlenecks. So be sure to check that out. But one of the things that, speaking of this topic and being able to adapt to non-modern mobile devices, is something that is included in Dojo, where they actually do a nice delineation between um, modern mobile devices and more legacy Windows Mobile types of devices, where they actually have a different library that is loaded and do some sort of dynamic, processing and adaptability to that. So, you may want to take a look at that and give it a try and see if it's something that is working for your application or not. So definitely check that out. It's in Dojo Mobile, and it's they call it the parser and compatibility library. And there's some tutorials and things on how to do that. Okay. All right. So let's get back to the second type of framework. Right. This is I call it the second persona of UI framework, is these frameworks that are trying to be both desktop and mobile. They kind of have this dual personality. Typically, they've stemmed from being a traditional web framework, and now they're moving more and more to be mobile as well. This is about the whole responsive design. These are typically um, backed by more designers, not developers. So they're like, take for example, Zerb Foundation. This is a designer shop that actually came out with this. So you'll see things that look a little more polished, if you will, when it comes to design and aspect. And it's for the most part geared more towards mobile, web, not so much mobile applications, but depending on your application and the number of pages and complexity that you have, this may be actually suitable. And particularly if your application is looking to run on both, a tablet, let's say, and a smaller form factor. These frameworks are all about being responsive. They're focused on being responsive. Everything is responsive, from their images to their types of controls to their layout. It's, for the most part, it's based off of this grid type of mechanism, where you basically say, okay, I want to take up this many columns, right? And it'll adapt based on orientation and screen size, right? So typically they come with some additional JavaScript libraries as well, but for the most part they're very heavy oriented on CSS, and you're really doing a lot of the controlling of how the application looks through markup. Okay, right through HTML. So again, this is pretty easy to jump on board and get used to. And actually, the demo I'm going to do at the end of this presentation is going to be using Zerb Foundation over here, this little furry creature. So, with these, you can pretty much, particularly if you're looking to prototype or get up to speed pretty quickly, you can do this even in your browser, right? And you can kind of spoof a mobile device by changing the user agent, or just changing the size of your browser screen, and you'll be able to see how this particular control or framework is going to behave on a mobile device. So it's very easy to kind of jump on board with these and get up and running pretty quickly. Some of these, like Zerb, provides some rapid prototyping tools. So if you're familiar with OmniGraph, and if you're into kind of laying out stencils and mock-ups before you start chugging ahead with coding, they provide some nice tools for that, and stencils to plug right into OmniGraph. Okay, the one thing you have to, so a couple things you need to be cautious with these. Obviously, since they come from a traditional web background and they're trying to be as mobile as mobile as possible, you need to test these on a mobile device, and really kind of especially around the touch aspects. So if you're looking for things to support swiping and gesturing and pinching and zooming, you're going to want to check to make sure that this control actually is working on a mobile device. Some of these work better than others, right? And then again, how complicated is your application? Is it very data orientated? Do you need to provide long lists and things that adapt to different data, or do you pretty much, are you more of does your application need to provide more of collecting data, where you have forms and typical things that you want to display? So take that into consideration. Um, and if you're not very savvy with CSS, some of these frameworks actually provide more of a programmatic approach to adjusting the CSS. So there's SAS or less is a preprocessor for CSS. So if you get familiar with how to use that, you can manipulate these quite easily programmatically by utilizing their preprocessing capabilities of CSS. Okay, and then the last part is, okay, now that if you looked at one of these and you say, okay, this looks pretty good, but it doesn't have this, this, and this, how can you add functionality to this? Does it support the ability to plug in different controls? Is it based on jQuery, where you can then take another jQuery plugin and inject a particular element that you're looking for that this doesn't provide? How easy is it to do that? So take that into consideration. So let me show this to you, just give you a quick example. Let's jump into, this is Zurb Foundation. And Zurb Foundation also has a, um, a responsive table, a little bit differently than jQuery mobile, but a similar type of concept where if I'm going down to a lower form factor, you can get different behaviors on the table. So you can see there's all different ways you can do it. So they actually provide a nice control ability to control how tables react across. So again, this is very responsive focused. They also provide a similar type of layout for off. They call it off-canvas layout. So this is, like if you wanted to have a sidebar menu like before, or in this case, I like this one, this paneled. So you can see on a larger screen, a tablet, you'll get these buttons on the top here, but as you scale down, it'll actually automatically change, and this will happen, automatically, right? So it's the same markup. There's no JavaScript, behind. You're basically just doing this all in markup. So that's kind of cool. They have this other thing which is really cool. Well, actually, two things is visibility classes. So right in CSS, let me jump down to CSS. So you basically say, okay, class equals show for large, show for large, and that particular element in your markup will only show up if the device is a certain size. So that's really nice, again, to have your same code developed once and work across different form factors quite nicely. Okay, so they have a lot of different aspects into, again, this is very, like I said, very focused on being responsive. So that is, if that is super critical to your application, then this may be the tool for you. All right, so now let me get into the last kind of let me turn to full screen here. The last framework persona. It's the JS MV whatever framework, right? So this is not, these frameworks are not so much geared to providing you stellar UIs. They're more geared towards providing you a way to organize your application, and in turn, they do kind of preach that it'll help develop you great interfaces, mostly through templating, right? Through JavaScript templating. But you'll see a lot of these. Basically, anything where you say, insert my name here, .js, is going to fall into these categories. One of some popular ones that I have there listed on the left: Backbone, Angular, Ember, Knockout. These are they each act in a little different ways. Some of them are more, I want to say, libraries where you can basically plug these into your existing architecture. So these are probably more suitable for plugging into, let's say, a roads application. We can kind of tie these into our data model aspect, and that will require a little bit more heavy lifting. And I'll probably have an in-depth tutorial on taking one of these JavaScript frameworks and actually doing that. And I'll go through that at a separate time. But that's one type. The second type of this type of framework is more of where you actually have to follow all their rules. Okay, so this is like you're all in, right? So once you decide on that framework, you're pretty much all in. You really kind of, it's more structured, and that may be great for what you're looking for, but keep that in mind as well. And you need to understand this. And there's a ton of resources out on the web. If you do some searching on, Backbone JS or whatever, plenty of comparisons for you to actually see other people analyze these and see what it takes to get on board, how to use them. Some of them actually have some online tools like Knockout. I think this is Knockout, right? Yeah, this is Knockout JS. I have a nice online tutorial where you actually can build the application right in your browser. And they all pretty much, they're obviously very JavaScript heavy. So if you're not familiar with JavaScript, you may want to get up to speed with JavaScript before you even attempt to do this. But for the most part, it's doing defining your models and your views, all in JavaScript. Typically like this code snippet here, and it's a lot about binding to data, and being able to follow an MV type of approach to structuring your application. A lot of these tend to be used in single page application architectures, which is really great for traditional web applications that are running on a web server, and you're worried about things, resources being transferred across the wire. But they're also very good for applications that are running like a Roads app on a device in a kind of local web server mode, where you don't need to do full page refreshes and process the JavaScript every single time you change your page. Very Ajax orientated, where you can update sections of the page or even the complete page, without too much effort. If you're doing a lot of interaction with data services, these are third-party data services. So if you have things that you're talking to a variety of different REST web services for different types of aspects, this type of framework may be a choice for you. So I'm not going to go too much more deeper into this topic. This is a whole nother probably full hour discussion. And again, like I said, I'll cover this at a later time, and we'll actually take one of these and walk through them. Okay. So let me spend a little bit of time before we jump into the demo of some things that might help, that we provide in terms of RhoMobile, that might help you adapt to different behaviors when it comes to UI, right? So one of the aspects that people tend to forget is that when they use our application generator, we provide this layout.erb, which is kind of, controls what the application looks like, and then it inserts all your different views. Well, you can actually develop a series of layouts and easily from your controller view or action render a different layout. Okay, so maybe you want to have a particular data model present a different view to the application than the rest of it. An easy way to do that is to just create a new layout .erb, and before you call your render action, just change the layout. So layout, my custom layout. So you can do that. There's some things you need to consider if you're using Ajax. So there's a couple of different properties, and this is in the online documentation. You can check that out. The second one you're probably most familiar with is our ability to detect the different platforms. So we have an API, system, get property, platform, and there's a couple other ones is there as well, where you can adjust to different things in your code, depending on the different platform, whether it's Apple, Android, Windows Mobile, etc. Another aspect where you can kind of adjust dynamically, and this happens, I guess, more dynamically than the previous one, is the ability to dynamically load a different view depending on your platform. So you'll see in our default generation um, that it includes BlackBerry views, and in version 4.0, it'll actually include a Windows Mobile view as well. And this is just done by the file extension name. So if you change the name, if this application is running on BlackBerry or Windows Mobile, it's going to automatically, without any extra coding, pick this view instead of the other view. Okay, so that's another way you can do it. Now, this last one here, if you're afraid of Ruby and you don't want to do too much coding in Ruby, and you want to use maybe some of those other frameworks like Backbone or etc., where a lot of those are geared more towards receiving data as a service. So like typically a JSON string, you can go into the controller and instead of actually rendering a layout, just render. Now in this case, I'm just showing you a string. But if you went in and changed kind of all of these controllers to actually, let's say, a view controller for a particular model, you can easily, render that model as a JSON string. And then in your, if you want to, stay in JavaScript and do everything in there, just call that method and expect a JSON result. And you do that by just saying render string and give it a JSON object instead. And then you can do whatever you want. So keep that in mind if you're considering some of these other frameworks. We provide a nice set of tools to kind of help you along with that. All right, so now I'm going to get into the actual demo of doing this. Let's see, let's do a time check here. All right, so we're doing pretty good with time. All right, so couple things. So let me jump into RHOStudio. We'll just kind of do this clean. I have this already done just in case things go bad, but let's do a new project. And we'll just create a new project here. And let's take a look at what we're going to do. You'll see that, obviously we provide jQuery Mobile as a default framework. If I go into the layout, you'll see a lot of this reference. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to replace all of this. And for this case, I'm just going to show you how to use Zurb Foundation. Okay. And you can, this really kind of the same kind of sequence of events applies to any framework that you pick. In this case, I've downloaded Zurb. Where is it? Foundation. And it came with, usually they'll come with an example, right? This is a pretty basic example, but typically they'll come with JavaScript, resources, etc. And what I'm going to do is I'm basically going to do a couple things first. I'm going to wipe out this public folder because I don't need any of this. If I'm getting rid of jQuery and the default styles, I'm going to delete all of these resources here, okay? Okay, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the resources that are referenced and I'm going to put those into my public folder. They can really be anywhere, but I'm just going to put them into my public folder. So now what I've done is I've basically taken what this framework Zurb provided as JavaScript, CSS, and images. There's really nothing in the images. Take those and put them in my public folder, and now they basically provided this default HTML page. Okay, so now you remember how the Rho application works is it brings up this layout file, and then it loads all this stuff, and then it inserts the view into the content area. So the default view is index, right? And that's what you're going to see, right? So I'm just going to replace that. I'm going to go into my layout. I'm just going to kill the whole thing. And then I'm going to take the index file here, which I have opened in Sublime, and I'm just going to copy it into my layout.erb. Okay, so now if I run this as is, it's probably not going to work because remember, it's referencing all of these CSS and JavaScript that it's expecting to kind of be in that same level. And if you recall, we moved those to the public. So I'm just going to go in there and update. Some of these have more than others. Some of the other things you may want to consider. Some of these provide references in their CSS file for attributes like images and icons, and they're expecting it to be in a certain folder. So the code changes that you make here to correct the pass may not just be in this file. It may actually also be in a CSS file as well. So you need to be careful of that. This is all commented out, so I'm not going to change those at all. This is commented, you see. Okay, so that's all I'm going to do. And now I'm going to create a new configuration and just run it just to kind of see if I have everything referenced right and everything else. So let me just select this new application that I built. All right, and it kind of looks like, it's supposed to, right? If I open this up in Chrome as well, you'll see that it looks the same. And I do have an error here, but it's just referencing this ICO file. So that's great. It looks like I have everything kind of referenced properly. So now the framework is really kind of plugged in. I can go in there and start, applying things, to my application, right? So let me just jump back to the presentation. So just to kind of recap, what I did is I just replaced the public folder. I replaced what's in the ERB file in the layout.erb. I went in and actually fixed the references to the CSS and JavaScript, so it's working properly. And then I just gave it a try, right? So now what I'm going to do is actually plug this back in and show you what's going on here. So let's go in and we'll just actually plug it right in here. Okay. So instead of doing all of this, let's get rid of their default page. This is just their default page, right? We're gonna get rid of that, and now it's just gonna pull the index.erb. Now let me point out to you some of the things that if you're new to Rho, and you may not have experience with jQuery Mobile, you may not realize like what's what here. What's Rho? What's jQuery Mobile, etc. What do I need to kill? What do I not don't need to kill? Basically, when we generate the application, we are expecting jQuery Mobile to be there. So you'll see a lot of reference to jQuery Mobile HTML attributes, right? So data role equals header, data position inline. This is all jQuery Mobile stuff, right? You'll see things like class equals UI button left, you know. So really there's two areas, data role and class is where you'll see jQuery Mobile references. So just to clean things up, I would remove all of that. And really, what you're going to want to do is just, apply what the new framework is providing to you. So in this case, for Zerb Foundation, I do everything. Remember, it says grid system. So I declare my div tags as a row, and then I can say, okay, I want this particular section to be 12 columns, right? So basically the whole width of the device. I want it to be centered. And then I'm also going to change my class to be a thumbnail with kind of a radius, right? So these are things that came from the framework. So classes and attributes, it's all going to depend on what framework you pick, right? So just because we're running out of time here, I'm going to, instead of building this live like I wanted to, I will show you what I did prior to this, and then we'll just run it, and then we'll open it up for questions. So what I basically did in this application, this was going to be an application where it was going to be a survey, a person standing in front of a retail store, a pet store, right? And they're going to ask questions about the different pet products. And some people are going to use their phone, and other people are actually going to use a tablet. So that's why I picked Zerb. So let me run the application, which is not really an application, it's just really a couple of pages to kind of show you. Okay, so in this case, I have my layout file, which is pulling the main index.erb, and this is all Zerb framework, right? So you see the nice nav bar at the top and I just took this right from their sample. I copied and pasted it into the application. If I look at my layout file, you'll see that if I go past here, this is how you define a nav, right? So this is Zerb's, rules right here. And I just copied and pasted this menu so I can see it work, right? And then here's my content section. So in my case, in my layout file, I want this menu to appear on every single page, and then this to individually appear from the different individual models. So I have this cat survey that we're going to do, and when I click this button, let me show you the index page. The index page basically looks like this, right? So the same type of thing that I had before, I just took out the menu, and now I have some Zurb Foundation rules here and classes. So again, this is a declarative approach to doing things. I got some placeholder images coming in here. And then here's where the nice UI elements come in just by putting this thumbnail and a radius. I get this nice, thumbnail border around my images, right? So depending on your framework that you pick, here's one of the visibility classes that I mentioned before, where I'm going to show this particular div tag if it's a large device. So maybe if you want to split the, see how it appears right here? All right, so that's a nice thing that Zurb has is you can easily, show and hide elements based on the size of the screen. So now let me jump into my cat survey. And again, I took this form so the question is, okay, do I still use the data model? Yeah, I still use the data model to generate, I did a right click, I did new, I did RhoMobile model, and I generated this model just so that it developed all these different views and corresponding stubs, right, in my controller that I can now change. And for the most part, the controller will stay the same, but I'm going to want to go into each one of these views, like I went into the new view, and I changed the way this view looked. So now I changed the class to be rows, and I just added all the Zurb stuff. Okay, and I still kept the key here is you want to keep your model attributes in the controls ID and name field. So this way, the controller code will still work. But for the most part, as long as you keep that, you can pretty much use the model generation and just manipulate the styles that you use in order to take advantage of the new framework. And this really kind of applies across the board to any framework. Okay. So that's my little quick demo. Let me make sure I didn't forget anything here. Yeah, so here I just talk about, you can use a model generator. I still like doing that, so this way it provides all those stubs that I just talked about before. All right. So just in real summary, just some really quick things. Three things, right? Consider all those framework factors that I mentioned before. Make sure that one size does not fit all. Not even one framework doesn't fit all. You may jump into different ones depending on the use cases that you're looking to provide. It all depends on the experience and level of complexity and all the different things that you're going to provide. But kind of take a look at those different factors and really understand what you're getting into. You don't want to invest in a framework that you're going to be spending a lot of time, not writing your application, doing other things, and you're going to want something that's going to actually provide and make it easy for you to write nice looking applications. So you make sure you're picking the right tool for the right job. That's basically what I'm saying. Some of these are better suited for other cases than others. And then the last thing is, you can do a lot of this development inside your browser, inside a Rho simulator, and get a good sense for what's going to happen and how it looks. But to really get a sense for how it behaves, you really should test it on real devices. The touch aspect, still some of the sizing, and maybe some platform-specific nuances that may happen across iOS or Android, Windows Mobile. You're going to want to check, and also be sure to check for the performance and the responsiveness of the application. Some of these are pretty heavy, and you can get a sense for the types of libraries that you're including. Some of these are pretty bare bones when it comes to size and JavaScript file size and all. So look at that, look at the performance, and really test on real devices to get a good sense for the type of framework that will be suitable for you. All right, so we got about 5 minutes left. I'm going to open it up to questions. I'm going to ask you guys a question while you're asking me a question. And I'm going to ask you, what type of framework do you use most often? The first one is using that first kind of native type of like jQuery, Sencha. Well, in the first bullet, it's more of a declarative. So I'm using a jQuery. I'm doing everything in HTML, CSS, basically. The next one is more programmatic. I'm doing everything in JavaScript. Or I use, kind of a responsive framework, or you actually use your own. You don't use any of these. I'd be interested to see that. All right, so let me open it up for questions. All right, so got a question okay, so which framework is most suitable for the current Motorola products? So currently we have Windows Mobile, Windows CE. We have some Android devices as well. We'll be coming out, new platforms that will support as well. So again, I don't think there's really any clear answer to that. You need to make sure that you're picking a framework that is going to behave and respond to the type of interface you're looking for. The one key that you need to remember on Windows Mobile, Windows CE is you got to keep in mind that most of these frameworks were designed for the more modern WebKit browser. Android, iOS, we did create a WebKit browser for Windows Mobile. That's the Motorola WebKit, and it will give you a lot of modern experiences. However, a lot of these frameworks are expecting GPUs to process graphics, um, to handle animations, excuse me, etc. So you need to keep that in mind. And to be quite honest, for the most part, you're going to want to make sure there's no advanced CSS3 animations, transitions, nothing like that. Dropshot. I did a whole presentation on this. Make sure there's none of that. You can still use some of these frameworks for some of your basic types of application structures. But again, you got to keep that in mind. So, all right. Next question: which framework is the lightest to get quick UI response? Um, yeah. So again, it's depending on what you're looking for. Some, if you're looking for, anytime that a UI needs to redraw several elements on the page. So if you're looking for like that kinetic scrolling effect, that's pretty heavy when it comes to processing and rendering, right? If you're looking for page changes and transitions, um, you know that's different. That's easier to process. So I think it all depends. It all depends on the device. If the device does have like the Android devices has a GPU, you'll be able to get a lot of quicker responses. I think it also depends on the makeup of your page, right? All of these, of course, follow web guidelines under the covers. So if you're not being a good web programmer citizen and you have a huge DOM and all the things that we kind of covered in previous webinars, the reaction is going to be hindered, right? So I would do my own comparisons on those and take a look and see, what your experience is. I tend to like different frameworks for different reasons and the different controls that I'm looking for. So anyway, I didn't answer your question directly, but hopefully that answered it. Do you recommend any framework, UI framework for developing on SB1? Yeah, so SB1, I did a webinar on this a couple of weeks ago. This is the e-ink display. So there's really no animations or transitions. You don't want to have that. You don't want to have the drop shadows and opacity. That's going to slow things down when it comes to drawing. Personally, I really probably uh, wouldn't really use too many of these frameworks because they're looking for more of the advanced CSS, right? And the SB1 is very basic. It's basically shades of gray, 256-bit, right? So I would stick more to the bare bones. Even some of the JS frameworks like Backbone, very light. I would look for minimal JavaScript size, small JavaScript libraries. I would look for the templating where I can just plug in simple UI elements. I think some of the more responsive, hold on a second, somebody wants to see the more responsive UI frameworks like Skeleton. Let me see if I can pull up Skeleton. I provide some bare bones. I haven't actually tried this one on SB1. Again, I mentioned some of these JS frameworks like Backbone, Knockout, maybe even. This would give you that MVC without having the row side. So you may want to look at some of these. Again, these are more where I'm going to do a further deeper dive. Somebody will actually do a Backbone SB1 session. Who knows? All right, let's see. Is there any questions? Here's the results. Yeah, that's what I thought. So a lot of people are using the declarative native type of UI. I'm surprised to see nobody's using the programmatic one. That's interesting. There's not too many JavaScript people on the phone, I guess. And a responsive one as well. So that's interesting. Okay. All right. Well, let's see. Any last minute questions? No? Okay. All right, guys. Thanks for joining today. I appreciate your time. Hopefully, you found this was useful. This was recorded. It will be posted online, and stay tuned for an announcement soon for the next upcoming Dev Talk, which will be in May. I don't have a confirmed dates. That's why I didn't communicate that today. So just be on the lookout for some announcements on that. All right. Thanks everybody for joining today, and we'll see you next time.